You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
And welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. A federal judge has blocked a Texas law that would have required healthcare providers to bury or cremate fetal remains after abortions. Judge David Ezra says the law violates both the equal protection and due process clauses and wrote that the law would likely cause a near catastrophic failure of the healthcare system designed to serve women. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton vowed to appeal that decision. Two West Texas representatives have filed to run for Texas Speaker of the House now. San Angelo's Drew Darby and Amarillo's Ford Price here, both known as more middle-of-the-road conservatives. They are the 6th and 7th House members to file to replace outgoing Speaker Joe Strauss. And former Lubbock City Councilman Paul Bean offered up a deal to 3 local school districts this week. Bean said he believes teachers should be able to carry guns if they choose to, and if Lubbock district leaders would allow properly trained and qualified teachers in the classroom to be armed, Bean would buy the first weapon for LISD, Friendship ISD, and Lubbock Cooper ISD.
One of the things that I offered to do was to purchase the first firearm for all 3 of those school districts.
It's tough to have a high schooler who's suffering from PTSD as a result of gun violence. And I know there's a lot more students in her school that have experienced this.
Officials with all 3 districts say they have no plans to change their safety policies anytime soon. If you're wondering why all the partisan craziness surrounding the confirmation of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, consider that 5 conservative Supreme Court votes could really limit abortions in this country at some point. So legislatures in several states, including Texas, would be much more likely to pass abortion bans with the hope that they would eventually be appealed to the high court. See how that works? KMAX West Rappaport also found that Kavanaugh's appointment could lead to even more legal changes for Texans.
So many of our colleagues across the aisle have announced their opposition even before he was nominated. The level of disingenuousness and hyperbole, even by today's standards, is extraordinary.
After a chaotic start to Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings, Texas Republicans were among those leading the effort to approve the nominee.
I am confident that Judge Kavanaugh will become Justice Kavanaugh.
I think they're all ready to give him a big wet kiss.
University of Texas law professor Lucas Poe says he expects a Kavanaugh confirmation would impact Texas in 3 primary ways. First, abortion.
He doesn't have to overrule Roe versus Wade to make abortion very difficult to get.
Second, capital punishment.
Over the last decade or so, there was increasing skepticism about capital punishment on the Supreme Court. And I wondered if at some point in time, a majority of justices might say, this just isn't worth it anymore.
And Kavanaugh's expected to side with Republicans on affirmative action. Poe says little has changed in the 2 months since the president nominated him.
I think on the day he was nominated, he had 50 Republican votes and had 49 Democrats in opposition. I think that's the vote today.
In Austin, Wes Rappaport, KMAC News.
All right, Wes, thank you. The yelling on this, especially on social media, has been so loud that we thought we needed some perspective, so we bring in one of our favorites, Texas Tech Associate Professor in the School of Law, Tracy Prolich, just come chat with us about it. Good to see you.
Great to see you.
You know, we've had a couple of these now in recent months and several in recent years, and we always hear the yelling now that the appointing of Person X will mean the end of Western civilization. Have Supreme Court appointments always been this visibly contentious?
No, in fact, quite the opposite. For years and years and years, there was a presumption that Supreme Court justices were competent, that they were qualified to serve on the court. And so you might see a little bit of grumbling here and there during their confirmation hearings, but sort of at base, they were sort of cursory, and we assumed that the nominee would be, in fact, confirmed. And so most Supreme Court justices actually had nearly unanimous votes, but that all began to change during the Obama administration. And so now what we're seeing are Supreme Court hearings being really an opportunity for political posturing on the part of both parties, and also just much more contentious votes.
Can you imagine someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg getting 95 votes or whatever it was again?
Right, yeah, no, certainly not in today's political climate.
No. General talk from Democrats has been that since Kavanaugh is a Republican, that this will pull the Supreme Court way, way to the right, even though it would be a 5-4 lean. Do we have evidence, though, that this will actually be the case? Just looking back on some of Kavanaugh's votes and the decisions he's made in the past.
I think the Democrats are right. So Judge Kavanaugh has been nominated to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was known most famously as a swing vote. He was a very moderate justice. And when he was on the court, there were 4 liberal justices, 4 conservative justices, and Justice Kennedy in the middle. And so it was a court really in balance. With Justice Kennedy's retirement, we're looking to replace him with somebody who is much more conservative, which would in fact take the court to a more conservative type of skew.
And there are some talk about decisions that may be coming down the pipe as far as health care.
Yep.
Abortion, which is always talked about, voting rights as well. Does this mean a monumental shift, or is it like he mentioned, Kavanaugh did, you know, you're not a Democrat or Republican when you are a federal judge and higher? Do we really believe that when it comes to these?
You know, I don't believe that, but I also don't believe that we're going to see drastic shifts in the court. Judge Kavanaugh said just today that he believes, for example, that Roe versus Wade is binding law, and that the principle of stare decisis would apply to it, meaning that it shouldn't be reversed unless there are very compelling legal reasons to do so. So not political reasons, not personal feelings. So that would suggest that he's not inclined to reverse Roe versus Wade, despite the fact that he's a conservative. So I would expect more conservative opinions coming from a court with Justice Kavanaugh on it, but I don't think it's going to be the end of the world, as Democrats might suggest.
Yeah, and you probably follow this a lot more than we're able to, but we hear all the loud noises from both sides of things on social media and everywhere else these days. Are the Supreme Court justices insulated from that at all? Are there any signs that they sort of will be pushed that way by the prevailing noise? I
don't think so. Certainly, Supreme Court justices aren't insulated from that. They don't live in a bubble. They're not nuns in a convent. But the Supreme Court makes a really concerted effort to be a non-political court and to make sure that all of their decisions are rooted in law and not just in politics or personal viewpoints. And that's something that's a principle that's near and dear to the Supreme Court's heart, I think, all 9 justices, and I think they'll continue to operate that way.
You know, we mentioned a little bit of the policy issues that may be coming up. If November's election does not go well for Republicans, it's not out of the question that in January we could be facing a presidential impeachment attempt. Kavanaugh has said he believes the sitting president should not face indictments. There's some thought that may have influenced the president's decision to nominate him in the first place. But would that mean anything if Kavanaugh is confirmed?
I can't imagine anything bubbling up to the Supreme Court that quickly, assuming that Kavanaugh is in fact the nominee and is confirmed. But certainly it could over the next couple of years if those cases sort of trickle up more slowly, and particularly if Trump is elected to a second term.
And sort of the health care issues that are bound to be coming up. Do you have any indication on where he might land on some of those?
He's been sort of a closed book on health care issues. It'll be hard to tell. You know, one thing that I always tell my law students is it's not the case that a Supreme Court justice can just impose their viewpoint. They have to wait for a case to trickle up from the lower courts, and they have to make a ruling on the case in front of them, not maybe the case they would like to see. And so it's really a combination of judicial philosophy, but also on the case that's in front of the court at the time.
All right, so watch the cases, not necessarily just the justices.
That's right.
You get all that out. Interesting. We like to get a good lesson from our friend Tracy Pearl over at Texas Tech Law School. Good to see you. Come back soon.
Great to see you. Thanks.
And coming up, for our economy, would you rather have a new farm bill on time or the right farm bill late? Lubbock's congressman among those wondering why it has to be one or the other.